I would like for us to now shift the conversation to some of the questions that our Sports Mvt community actually sent through to us and that they would like to ask you. I'd like to start off with this one from 𝗀𝗻𝗋𝗋𝗋. 𝗀𝗻𝗋𝗋𝗋 simply asks for advice if you were to run your first Comrades Marathon. So if I'm planning to run 2022, what advice would you give me?
To get your mileage in, I think always have a plan. So have your not necessarily race plan, but your training plan in place well ahead of time. So you also, can gear your mind to understand what is needed of you, the previous week before. So like essentially, if you know that I need to be running 100 Ks next week, what does that look like? Break it up so it's actually achievable, as opposed to then starting the week and then towards the end of the week, you're trying to kind of jam in as much mileage as you can. I think that's a very key thing. Nutrition is very key as well. I think sometimes we take for granted like what we're putting into our bodies, but like food can make you, or the wrong kind of food can make you very sluggish. So because your output is so high, you need to ensure that you're fueling correctly so your body can give you what it needs. Hydration is another one. I'm not great at drinking as much water as I should. And I think that was very key at that point to say, okay, cool, what's your water intake looking like? Because you're putting your body under quite a lot of strain to a degree, in the sense that, you're balancing your normal life, it's work, it's all of these things, plus training as well, so is your body working as optimally as it should? And are you fueling it or giving it what it needs in order for it to do so? Get your mind in check, like get your mind in the game. I think if you're not mentally engaged, it makes it very difficult for you to actually tune into it and to actually make it happen and to commit to the process. And ultimately, like, get back to like understand why you're doing it. If you're doing it because other people are doing it, I guess the motivation won't be as high, or your commitments won't be as much as when you're doing it for yourself. So essentially, is it because it's a goal that you want to kind of, accomplish? Is it because you want to see what you're capable of doing? Don't go off of what everyone else is doing. Make sure it's about you. That's what I'd say.
Oh, absolutely beautiful. Michael sends through this question. He simply asks, what's your go-to running app? Which app do you like using the most? I'm assuming it's got something to do with Nike's range of apps.
Well, okay, actually, no. So I do use the Garmin watch. So what I did understand is once you get into racing and into like the marathon distance, etc., the actual, app doesn't last as long because the phone dies. So I did get a Garmin. So that's what I currently use. I'm using the Vivo Active S. But from an app perspective, it does sync obviously to the Garmin app, but it also does sync to my NRC app because we love the Nike Running Club app. So for short distances and when I don't have my watch on me, I will always default to the Nike Running Club app. Yeah, that's all I've ever used. That's what I kind of prefer using app-wise.
𝗀𝗹𝗹𝗶 sends through this question. What are your preferred running shoes, especially on race day? And I would like to add on to this question. I've heard runners have training shoes and race day shoes. Can you maybe just explain the difference between the two types of shoes?
So the training shoes are shoes that you can get like a lot of mileage. You can get a lot of mileage on them. Essentially, like I had explained earlier, I do have the Tempos, and the Tempos, the Nike Next Percent Tempos, which are then my training shoe. And then the Vaporfly would be my race day shoe. So from a responsiveness perspective and a fastness and how the shoes actually react, they are quite similar. But obviously, from a price point perspective as well, you're looking at various factors to say, okay, cool, you're not going to be running in a shoe that costs you 6K on a daily basis, because it means the shoe is going to, meet its mileage end quicker, which then means that you'll have to kind of replenish them. So I think it's looking at costings, but like also looking at the shoes and, what gives you the kind of most optimal experience on your run. Technology is a very key thing. So I guess it's also understanding like how your body responds, how your body reacts to that particular shoe, what you like, what you don't like. There are things to consider, like, your gait. Some people are pronators, other people need stable shoes, etc. So that does play a major role. So I'd say never buy shoes based on what is the fad, but like go on what actually works for you. So if you can go for a gait analysis, do that 100%. If you find a shoe that works for you, then maybe get 2 pairs of those shoes. So one you can use to train with and the other you can use on race day. I don't think there is a blanket approach to say, okay, cool, like this is the kind of formula to go with. It is nuanced based on the person and based on your experience. But for me, that's what I found works from a shoe perspective. But then again, I was at a point where I was using my training shoes to race with, and that wasn't the thing, and that worked fine, you know. As much as I mean, as long as I hadn't met the mileage cap, they were still good enough for me to race with. But I think you evolve over time and you become a different runner in different phases of your running journey, etc. And that influences how you do certain things. The Nike Pegasus was my go-to shoe for anything. Training, any day you knew you'd find me in that shoe. But then again, you know, the technology was elevated and I found that this actually works better for me. So yeah, find what works for you, essentially.
All right. 𝗙𝗻cie sends through this question, which is actually quite a simple, beautiful question, but it relates to the pack. How do I join the pack?
Okay, cool. Awesome. So the pack is open to anybody. So if you go to our page, it's at the pack running on Instagram. So we meet every Saturday morning at 6:30 from the Nike store in Rosebank, and we have different distances. So we've got a 5K, an 8K, a 10K, and a 15K. And then you can we break it down, you know, based on pace. So once we've actually grouped the groups together, you'll then have a running buddy to run with based on where you fall from a pace perspective. Again, we do have people that are running at like 4:45 per minute, but then we also have people running at 8 minutes per kilometer, you know, so it is quite varied. And I think we offer, you know, scope for different types of runners to join us. So there's no need to sign up. There's no fee, you know, associated with joining. You just show up and we get together and we run. And hopefully you can stay for coffee afterwards so we can get to know you better. But yeah,
absolutely beautiful. Tell me, does the pack have branches across the country, or is it specifically in Joburg at the moment? And are you planning on branching out possibly?
Well, we did branch out to Cape Town at some point, but then, you know, I think a lot of things happened, you know, prior to COVID or with COVID as well, so it kind of slowed things down. Also did have a branch in Gaborone in Botswana. You know, the thinking is have it be, you know, a nationwide thing or something that people can be able to take part in nationally as opposed to just Joburg, because it kind of feels like a destination experience at the moment. We are working on fleshing out a plan for it to be available in other cities in the country. And yeah, keep posted on our page. We'll update any information that does come forth from there. But for now, we are only situated in Johannesburg.
All right. Nikki sends through this last question. She simply says, what are some of the key lessons you've learned from the Nike Running Club Pct team?
Oh, wow. Like that was a very fundamental part of my journey. And I think that's where the passion for the pack came from and the passion for people, for runners came from as well. I think as much as we were runners, I think it was great to kind of have a way of actually structuring, you know, how we run and having, you know, background as to why we do particular things, etc. And it's silly things like, you know, stretching or warming up before a run, you know, and how essential that should be and like what that needs to look like. Because as well, you kind of warm up for like 2 minutes and you're like, okay, cool, I'm good to go, but that's not enough. Your muscles aren't warm enough, you know. And recovery in the sense of actually stretching post a run, switching up your running, you know, or your training to say, okay, cool, are you incorporating hill repeats? Are you incorporating speed runs? Are you incorporating HIIT? You know, and the importance of like cross training as well. So I think it made me a smarter runner. And just, you know, to understand like how my body responds to certain things. So I know, okay, cool, if I'm looking for, you know, speed or whatever the case may be, let's incorporate a couple of, you know, speed sessions in my training plan, etc. So that was a very instrumental part. And I think anyone that actually came to NRC got the impact of that and actually got to benefit from, you know, the kind of structure that kind of environment offered.
All right, let's end off with this last question from Michelle. She simply says, what words of encouragement do you have for females that will be participating in the Comrades next year in 2022?
You can do it.
You're locked on to the Sports Mvt Insider, a podcast for unrelenting coverage of women in sport. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I absolutely loved diving deeper into the journeys of our athletes, coaches, and administrators to get to know them a little bit better than we do. Coming up next week, we bring you another athlete, coach, or administrator, and she shares her incredible and inspiring journey with us. Keep it locked onto Sport Mvt, where we celebrate women in sport.